Jubilant, evolving, twice born.
You are listening to The Brave Files, real stories from people living courageously. You can listen to the show anywhere you enjoy podcasts, and we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on Apple Podcasts. It really does make a difference, and we appreciate it. Now here's your host, Heather Vickery.
Hello, listeners. This is Heather Vickery. Welcome to The Brave Files, where we tell the stories of everyday people just like you and me who choose to step out of fear and into bravery each and every day. Remember, the goal isn't to be fearless. It's to choose bravely. Today's guest changed her life when she decided to get curious. Max Tang runs a blog and a vlog series called Max Gets Curious, aptly named. And what Max discovered was that getting curious about the world empowers us to become and explore more. As a former fundamentalist Christian turned authentic, proud, queer woman, Max advocates open-mindedness in just about every way possible. I first connected with Max via Instagram, which I have to admit has been an awesome breeding ground for connection. Max, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We've been looking forward to this. It's been quite a while since we first connected, and I am really anxious to hear all about your different levels of curiosity. But before we get too deep in that, can you share a little bit of your background with our listeners?
Sure. So I grew up in a tight-knit Chinese American Christian community. So we were non-denominational, but the best label for what we believed was Baptist or evangelical. And so growing up, it was a really warm and welcoming community for me to be in. And it infused my life with a sense of belonging and purpose. So we would have church on Sundays and prayer meeting on Tuesdays, and then youth group on Fridays, and summer retreats and winter retreats. Really, my whole world was wrapped up in this group of people and in what we believed.
So what I think is so interesting is to hear you talk about it. You seem to have such a loving connection and memory for it. It feels very sweet to hear you talk about the way you grew up.
Thanks.
Is that how you feel?
I do. And for a long time, when I was starting to question and doubt my faith, and when I was losing it, and then when I was in the closet for 5 years, I did not feel so positively.
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked that question. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've come to learn that even if a place hurts you, you can still have good times there. So I've learned to honor both those parts.
Oh, I love that. Obviously, I have been on the earth for 44 and a half years now. So I have learned that lesson. But it's a really beautiful way to say it and phrase it, that you can find fondness in things that were once painful if you choose to look. This is why I spend so much time, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, with the importance of gratitude. There's always something that's good somewhere if you really look hard. Sometimes you have to look really hard.
Very, very hard. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so when did you begin to get curious about the world beyond the one you were raised in, and what did that look like for you?
So it took me quite a long time. So as I said, the place where I grew up was a place of a lot of belonging and warmth at times. But the way we looked at the world was very, very black and white. I remember growing up hearing things like, you are not your own, you were bought with a price, which is straight from a Bible verse.
And I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure Paul wrote it, which makes sense because Paul was a doozy of a guy. But anyway, I remember we did street preaching training. So I'm actually trained in something called the Way of the Master, which is actually far less of like a ninja training program, which is what it sounds like, and way more of like how to approach strangers on the street and ask them about their mortality and then try to get them to to convert.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember in our training book, we had literally caricatures of people, like the types of people we might encounter on the street, and like their names were puns, and like the drawings of them were cartoons, and like there was like an atheist, and there was a liberal, and you can tell it was a liberal because it was a vegan. Yeah, so like and like we
Wow.
didn't read Harry Potter because witchcraft, and I actually didn't listen to secular, so quote unquote regular person music until probably high school or college, because I only listened to two Christian radio stations growing up. So I didn't like, I couldn't have picked out Britney Spears or Beyonce out of a lineup. I couldn't tell you who they
Wow.
were. Yeah, so that black and white thinking kind of created this echo chamber, this insulation that I grew up in. And so I wasn't curious for a very long time. Being curious outside of the worldview that I had was actually terrifying and dangerous, because
Sure.
my whole life had been built to rest on all these assumptions about how the world must be and what we should be afraid of, and so on and so forth. When I got to high school, I started to meet people who weren't afraid to push back on my beliefs or my conversion attempts.
I'm
Um,
quite I'm quite surprised your parents didn't have you in a private Christian school.
oh, they considered it, yeah, and I'm really glad that I didn't end up in one.
I'll bet. It would have taken you a little longer to get curious. It's interesting to
Exactly.
me, though, for them to have been so religious that they didn't sort of keep you in that bubble.
I think part of it was that I was always like the zealous kid. Like they didn't really have to do much because I was already so devoted. I remember I got baptized twice because I felt like the first time wasn't good enough, and I was
Wow.
also a perfectionist. Yeah,
Are you a
and like
recovering perfectionist now, or is that still something you identify with?
I think that recovering perfectionist fits me. Yeah.
All right, excellent. So you head off to high school and you start trying to convert your fellow students, and they're pushing back.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I didn't try to convert too many people because I always felt the pressure to try to convert people in my life, but I was really scared to. And part of the equation was the fact that I grew up with really bad anxiety.
Mm.
And sometimes I actually couldn't speak because of that anxiety. That's called situational mutism or selective mutism. Yeah. And so I really felt the need to convert people, but I didn't very often because it's very nerve-wracking to
Sure.
do. But yeah, at times I would just be talking with people, and I made friends. I had a friend who was Jewish, and actually a bunch of friends who were Jewish, and you know how public high school is. And
Sure.
I had a friend who came out as trans at one point, and during the first half of my high school years, that was really when I started doubting, because I was making all these friendships and having these conversations with people and into things on the internet that really kind of pushed back against my black and white rigid way of seeing the world.
So what
And
does that feel like, right? When you so deeply believe in the things that you believe in, I think from what I've heard from people over all of these interviews and all of the conversations I've had is that you either go very firmly like, no, 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 these things that I believe are right, or you say, wait, what? Am I wrong? Like, am I wrong this whole time? But to me, I think that's a pretty big leap to question what you've always believed to be the truth. Was that
mhm.
hard?
Oh yeah, and I'm trying to remember the framework. So I listened to this podcast called the Wordless Podcast. It's for ex-Mormons. And in one of their first episodes, they talk about this, their own experiences of doubting and choosing to seek life beyond Mormonism. And they came up with this really great framework for the leaving process. And I wish I could remember it. But yeah, I think this is something that's common for so many people who end up leaving their religious backgrounds. It's a back and forth for a long time. And for the first 2 years, it was a tug of war. I didn't even consciously allow myself to doubt until maybe like sophomore year of high school, because it was so scary to allow myself to question any of these things, because, I thought of the book of Job, where Job asked questions of God, and God comes down in a really dramatic way and says, basically, how dare you question me? I'm God. I don't owe you any answers. And actually, in that book, God had totally destroyed Job's entire family and livelihood for a bet against the devil to see if Job would be loyal to him. So it wasn't
nice
that
parenting.
He was simply asking, he wasn't just asking questions. He was asking questions. Why did you allow this to happen to me? And God was like, I don't owe you any answers. So for me to just have simple questions like, is it okay for people to be Jewish? Or could it be okay for my friend to be trans? Were really scary questions for me to begin asking.
Absolutely.
I remember actually the first time I cursed out loud was during high school. And I was
Felt
truly
good, didn't it?
afraid that lightning would strike me, and it didn't.
Yes, it
So,
didn't.
yeah,
Absolutely.
a lot of fear and unconscious battles, and a lot of times I would think, okay, I just want to explore some ideas outside of everything that I've always believed. And then I'd be like, oh no, I can't, and something would convict me. I'd feel guilty. And then I'd be like, I'm sorry, God, how could I ever do that? And this would happen in cycles of within a day, or multiple times in a day.
The one thing I was never raised religious. I mean, we were quote unquote Christian, but we didn't go to church. We didn't talk about it. We didn't pray at dinner, none of those things. But one thing that's always struck me as so unbelievably shocking is the deep level of guilt that most people, Catholic, Christian, and it's not from my experience. Now, listeners, if you are of a different religion and I've got this wrong, please let me know. But I feel like the guilt is singularly attached to a Christian religion, Christian Catholic. I don't hear that from my Buddhist friends or from my Muslim friends, or, I just think, what is that about? The guilt. It's so gross.
I can't speak for all experiences because every religious experience is different.
Yes.
But for myself, it was an authoritarian relationship with God,
right.
Where if God was like a person, you would call the cops, because the way that he approaches, or the way that we perceived God approaching his relationships with us, was very toxic and very paternalistic. And it mirrored the way that relationships were in our own culture as Chinese Americans. So I think there's that piece there too. That's why it made so much sense to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So as you're beginning to get curious and question and try new things, do your parents know?
They didn't know, because a lot of it was very subconscious at first.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally a back and forth of me being like, I want to explore this. Not like I'm going to explore this, but I'm just going to decide to explore this, and being like, no, I can't do that. And so when I started to, I would go online, and I would go on YouTube and watch videos and websites and learn about evolution, because we actually did workbooks about why evolution was wrong growing up. Yeah. And no Christian school, but we got that in. And things about sex education 101, because I had always avoided sex ed when I was in school, because I just didn't want to be seen as sinful or anything like that.
Did you get a religious exemption for taking sex ed?
I don't think I did too many times, maybe for some of the videos, but
because it's required for my kids in school.
Yeah, I think I did have to go, but maybe some of the videos, they allowed people to leave.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but I also my church was part of the purity culture movement. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. There was actually just a piece that came out in Cosmo.
I have, but why don't you tell the listeners who maybe haven't heard what that purity movement is?
How to describe it?
It's a bit much.
I'll leave the details about when it began and who the key players were and all that to research. But
yeah, we'll link it in the show notes, friends.
Yeah, but basically, purity culture is this collection of ideas and teachings, and also practices that are taken by people in leadership and things like that, where the idea is that men cannot help themselves sexually.
Oh boy.
And women need to kind of take the burden of dressing modestly because it's a sign of respect to their quote unquote brothers. And there's really a focus on sexual purity because there's this idea that your body doesn't belong to you, it belongs to your future husband.
Oh
And so
boy.
there's a really popular book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye by Josh Harris that came out probably in the 90s. I actually had like 2 videotapes of it in my house, and people didn't even know that they existed, but I don't think I ever watched them. Anyway, this was a really, really popular book. And in the book, there is a description of you walking down your wedding aisle, and the groom is waiting at the end, but he's holding the hands of many other girls. And basically the idea is that everyone you have sex with, you're basically getting married with.
I wish y'all could see my face right now.
Yeah, and that you're giving away pieces of your heart that you can never get back to everyone that you have sex with before marriage. So it's a really, really damaging black and white way of seeing sexuality. And it hurt many, many people, both men and women, people who got married purely so that they could have sex because they couldn't outside of marriage.
Yeah,
people who
crazy.
like had encounters with each other and then felt really guilty and confessed to authorities, and they were punished and the relationships were damaged and all of that, or never reported anything, or people who were sexually assaulted too, in churches, in institutions, in universities, and who went to authorities and were told that this was their fault. It's kind of the Christian version of what were you wearing.
Yeah, I can't even. And of course, this all comes down on the girls and the women, right?
Exactly.
Because men, quote unquote, can't help themselves, which makes me insane.
Yeah.
I am so impressed with I have a daughter in 8th grade, and she is a fierce feminist, which I love. It's no surprising. I have 4 daughters. They're all pretty badass, but she pushes the dress code rules. She'll show her shoulders or she'll show her belly, and will literally take it to the streets with the administration or with people who want to say, oh, that's against dress code. And she's like, look, if that boy over there can't focus on his test because my shoulders are showing, it's his problem and not mine. And
absolutely,
my girl, you can get in trouble anytime you want with that, because you will never hear me supporting any ridiculous thing like that, because we all have to have responsibility for ourselves. And we all, especially as teenagers, no matter what your gender is, have urges. It's a normal thing. That doesn't mean you can't learn to control and manage them.
Absolutely.
All right. We totally got off topic there, but thank you for that. All right. So when do your parents start to discover that something's changing with you?
Well, I was looking up stuff about sex ed online. Because I'd never paid attention in sex ed. Yeah. And because I grew up in purity culture, so we would I can list so many different metaphors for sexual purity that we were shown in demonstrations, like a water balloon and a needle, or like a dirty lollipop, or like toothpaste being squeezed out of a tube. None of these are affirming, beautiful images.
No.
But I would look up stuff online. Just evolution was also in the cards, and just like terms about sexuality. And I was starting to wonder if I was bisexual. And my parents did have internet monitoring software, like a lot of other people in church. So they did catch 1 or 2 things, but it was never a conversation that we had that I was thinking about these things. Like I found a way to explain away all of them. Like, oh, I just want to learn about evolution so I can better argue against it and stuff like that. Yeah. So they really didn't know. And this was a terrifying time for me in high school, because I was starting to also go on ex-Christian sites and kind of read some alternate views of Christianity. And that was when everything kind of started to unravel. Like I was like, wait, I'm not straight. And even from the beginning, simply questioning my faith was something that I could never tell my parents, because my mom is so zealous that like I wasn't sure what would happen if she found out that I was questioning. And I really could not afford to find out. So I kept that hidden. And I remember talking to the pastor actually and being like, I'm having doubts, but you cannot tell my parents under any circumstances. And he totally understood.
Did he honor that?
He did, yeah, because he saw the way my mom acted and he understood.
All right.
Yeah, but
surprising.
then the sexuality piece came in and I was like, oh, I'm not straight. And like, they definitely can't find out about that. And then I started to unravel this idea that like my faith was the only one true and good way of being in the world. And that actually it had done me a lot of harm and it had done some other people a lot of harm. And that there were other ways of being a Christian or actually even being good at all. And that was really traumatizing for me, honestly, because I had grown up with all these people that I had trusted most in the world and always said, these are my family, and always heard like, no one else will love you more than a Christian will. No one else will love you more than your blood family will. Man. And to find out that they had taught me these things that were damaging and to see that in myself, like the depth of the harm that was in myself, that was really difficult. And also to do that without talking to anyone about it and having to hide it from the people that I lived with was really, really hard. So it was a time of a lot of isolation for me.
Yeah, I cannot imagine. It would have to be, I came out, at 38 after being married for over a decade and having 4 kids. So totally different scenarios, but it's hard enough to be young. I think it's hard enough to figure out how to be a teenager and what kind of person you want to be and what boundaries you want to build and push and all of that. I just think that would be incredibly difficult. So obviously at some point you decided you weren't going to live in the fear of this. I mean, I assume you've got this very public facing blog and vlog and Instagram account. Your parents must know at this point.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So talk us through that a little bit.
So because I was so isolated, the internet was a place of such community for me. And I started a blog called Max Goes Godless. And that was kind of this secret WordPress where I could disentangle all of these beliefs that I'd grown up with and just talk about my journey, trying to figure out a way forward after I realized I no longer believed in this religion.
Right.
And it turns out that a lot of people really resonated with what I was writing. It was very raw at the time because I was processing a lot of trauma and elements of abuse that were in the religion and also in my home. And so it was a really raw time, but it allowed me to connect with so many other people who really, really needed to talk about things like this. And there were no other resources out there. So I was able to form kind of internet friendships with people. And I came across a blog called The Art of Leaving, which is it's a post-religious support blog. I became a co-moderator and now I'm pretty good friends with the founder. We saw each other through some difficult times, just through the internet. Just like I did with a lot of other people that I had met online, like ex-Muslims, ex-Mormons, ex-Catholics, ex-Pentecostals, ex-Evangelicals. I joined an ex-evangelical Facebook group that now has over 5,000 members and counting. So there's a really big online community for people who are post-religious and seeking a way forward. That was my saving grace, truly. But when I left, it was very difficult for me to survive high school and to get to college because my mental health just worsened when all of these things were happening and I couldn't tell anyone. And I lost my close friendships with people at church because I wasn't able to be honest with them about who I was becoming and what I was thinking. And that was also really difficult to just see the distance widen. But I made a pact with myself to survive until college. And
I appreciate that because what I'm hearing you say that you're not saying is that there may have been some challenges to wanting to live.
Yeah, I was suicidal multiple times in high school. And then also when I got to college, like I remember the first day of college, it was one of the happiest days of my life. And that was just awesome. Like going to college was the best thing for me because I went to college. 5 years, 5 hours away.
It felt like 5 years. 5 hours away from your super controlling religious parents probably felt like another continent. No, what I love about that for anybody who's listening is, I'm a big fan of these short-term, small, achievable goals. And not to say that it was easy for you to push through, but to say, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to push through until college, and then I'm going to reassess there. That's a really brave and sort of grown-up thing to do, right? To set this seemingly short-term goal, like, let's just get through this one. And I say that to my kids and to my clients. Okay, let's not worry about what's happening next week, next month, next year. Let's get through this hour right now, and then let's get through the next one. And it doesn't have to be big and all-consuming. You can do things in really small ways that have a really big impact.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you got to college. You still haven't told us what happened when your parents found out.
Oh, because I'm getting there. I was in the closet for 5 years.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit further to go. Yeah, so I got to college, and it was incredible because I got to make all these new friends. And, when you move to a new place, you get to shed like that old reputation, and you get to be a new person. And for me, because I had grown up with selective mutism or situational mutism, I had gotten the reputation of being like the really quiet one.
Sure.
And that just made it so much harder to talk in those situations. So but I had always believed deep down that I was, a different person, that I was like a happy and energetic and silly and warm person. And when I got to college, I was really able to let that shine for like the first time in my life. So what I had always believed was kind of put into practice, and it was incredibly affirming for me. Yeah. So I loved college. I got to make all these new friends from different backgrounds, and that was really great. But on the breaks, I still had to go home, and that was really difficult for me. And the suicidal ideation came up again because I would go to church and be worshiping this God that I didn't believe in, and I had never gotten to mourn him, actually.
That's an interesting concept. That's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, like our faith is based on the whole idea that it's relationship, not a religion. And so I had what I felt was a personal relationship with the creator of the universe, like the creator of C# and elm trees and all these beautiful things. And so when I kind of lost, like, what's that, the Dorothy story. I can't think of it. Oh, Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
The man, is he a green man? I don't know. The man behind the curtain.
Oh, the wizard. Yeah.
Yeah. I had always had this idea of who he was. And now I had to come to terms with the fact that actually my ideas behind the relationship that I had with this God was hurting me. That was really difficult. So that was something that I did have to mourn, but I didn't have the space to.
Right.
So that was the first 2 years of college, and I started going to therapy. And my therapist, I've never connected so deeply with the therapist that I had at the time. He left after a year, but it was really, really powerful for me to start going to therapy and start hearing someone say, yeah, that was effed up. And
therapy is really valuable. I feel like everybody should be in therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had so much to work through, but fast forward to sophomore year. So I actually had to go back home at the end of freshman year because I hadn't been able to find an internship or a class or anything else to keep me at school. And I felt like the last day of the semester would be the last day of my life, which I know sounds dramatic. I really didn't think I was going to be able to survive going home and having to be there day in and day out, remembering just the trauma of having to lose my faith and my sense of belonging and all those beautiful things that I had when I believed. And this was so difficult for me because I didn't have a support system, a network of people who were also daring to be curious or finding a way forward. It was kind of just, like other people who have also been hurt, and we've been hurt, and we are just floating out here, but together. I went home and I thought that I might end up committing suicide by the end of the summer. And I didn't. Sad. And so, yeah.
Thank goodness you didn't.
I want to give Patsy a hug.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when I got back to school, it was a very strange, maybe anyone who's listening can relate who has ever wanted to commit suicide and then didn't, because it feels very like surreal, like you're still alive.
And you didn't expect
And
to be.
yeah, and so I fell into a really deep depression, and like I still had to go to Bible study on campus, and that was really difficult
Why?
because they
Why
were
did you have to
a
go to
whole
Bible study
something.
on campus?
Because my mom would like check up and stuff like that.
Okay.
Because part of the deal was like, oh, you should be going to Bible study and being part of a Christian community when you go to college, so you don't lose your faith.
And this is because your parents were paying for you to be in college.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was really hard for me. And I even remember telling my therapist, like, I don't think love is real. And like being really, what I would say, like, I can laugh about it now, but it was really hard. And I remember I was just looking for some way to believe that I could move forward, because over the summer I had actually come up with a runaway plan in case my parents found out anything when I was home and I just needed to leave. So I had a
It's
runaway
pretty
bag
smart,
packed
actually.
in my closet. It was really difficult.
Self-preservation. Yeah.
It was the hardest time of my life, because I had also made friends at college, but I didn't know how to be open with them. And I didn't feel it was safe to be open with them. So I didn't really tell any of my friends what was going on. So I was doing all this alone. But yeah, it was smart because I also ended up looking up how to apply for financial aid by yourself, which is actually an extremely difficult process. And that's the reason why I ended up being able to stay in college. But that's a little teaser for later. I was really depressed. I was looking for something to tell me that I would be able to have a life worth living, because I didn't think I was ever going to be able to come out to my parents until at least after I graduated. And even after that, I couldn't imagine doing it.
Right.
I couldn't imagine being out and safe and happy and living a life for myself rather than as a Christian versus as a former Christian, which is now my identity. I was trying really hard to find a way to know myself, discover myself, belong to myself, and just have a life of my own rather than a life that had been dictated by the presence or the absence of a God. I ended up going on Reddit and I was talking about my experiences. Yeah. And this person commented, why do you need a purpose in life? And I was sitting like on the edge of this pond by the 3 chapels on campus. And I remember thinking about it, and this was like a turning point moment for me, because I was looking out like kind of into the distance, and it was like a really nice sunset. And I was thinking like, why do I have to have a purpose? Like Jupiter doesn't have a purpose. It just it just spins. And like the trees don't have a purpose. They just weave light.
Trees
Like
totally have a purpose. Sorry, different podcast episode. But
right. But it was just really freeing for me to think, oh my God, like actually there are no rules in life. Like I don't even have to get a 9 to 5 after I graduate. Like if I can find a way to support myself, I can live any life I want. Like there's no one who will tell me what to do. Like I get to decide for myself how I choose my future. And that was such a gorgeous, freeing moment for me. It's absurdism, like the philosophy that you don't have to have a purpose or you make your own purpose. And so that was really wonderful for me. And it started a chain reaction of events where basically I started to get curious about other people's stories, people who had left difficult situations and religious backgrounds, basically who had left the life that was all they knew and then created a new one afterwards. And that gave me so much hope and flexibility to understand that I could do the same thing. I ended up learning more about myself and feeling like I was starting to heal finally. I started to believe that I could have a life beyond this one, that I could afford to pay the price of coming out to my parents, and that I deserved that. And so this was all very subconscious.
No, but it's a quite mental journey that you went down.
Absolutely. And so finally, I'm at the answer to your question. So almost 2 years ago now, it was March 19th. I was talking to my parents on the phone on a Sunday night, and I ended up just blurting out, I don't believe anymore, and I'm not straight. And
I don't believe anymore, and I'm not straight. All at once,
I
like
was
one
also
big
a
long
psychology
sentence.
and sociology major, and my parents are like Chinese immigrants, so it was just a doozy,
Wow.
a trifecta. Yeah, but it was really difficult. They cried, and well, mostly my mom cried. My dad just kind of left, and she was like, "Why are you doing this to us?"
Of
and
course.
all
It's
this
always
stuff.
about everyone else, right? It couldn't possibly be just
Right.
about you.
And yeah, and a big, it's not just the religious part or the generational part. It's also the the Chinese cultural part, I
Sure.
think, as immigrants,
Yeah.
because, we accept the ideas that are passed down to us and we challenge other ones. And they had accepted the homophobia that was passed down to them through the religion and the culture and their generation. And so here their child is saying that they are queer. And I remember having a conversation with my dad in high school where I asked, "Oh, do you think that the Bible could ever accept queer people?" And like there was just contempt and like disgust on his
Of
face. And I knew
course.
yeah. So I remembered that. And in that moment, that was all finally happening. Like the reactions of my parents, I ended up hanging up the phone and I sat in my bed and I was like, holy shit, it's finally happening. And I know that this situation sounds dire, but actually it was the happiest, freest,
I
most
totally
fun
get
time
that.
of my life.
Yeah, no,
Because
coming out is hard and freeing and magical and as honest and raw as it gets.
yeah, I mean, the next day I got a text from my dad saying, "You will no longer go to the school. I'm not applying for FAFSA or paying any more. You'll finish this semester. Actually, you won't even finish this semester. I'm going to drive up and get you. You'll come back. You'll go to community college and choose a major that we think is acceptable. And if you want, you can get your own apartment and we'll get you a car. But like, this is happening." And I
Did it
remember
happen?
like,
Is that what happened?
suspense.
I know, right?
What do
But
you
we
think?
only have a 45-minute interview. So.
Right. Okay. All right, I'll get there. So I remember like my dad had kind of always thought like what I say is what happens, right?
Right, of
He
course.
didn't think that I had a choice otherwise, but I knew differently now. So I said, no, I'm not going back. I'm going to stay here and appeal to be able to apply for financial aid by myself. And I found all around me this chosen family of people who
Yes.
had always been there for me, even though I didn't know how to lean on them. People offered me like a place to sleep, like couches. And so for the next kind of year, I really relied on people. Like I got, I think 2 jobs. Now I have 3 jobs, but yeah, it was 2 jobs back then, and supported myself. And I had a fundraiser. And actually, through the fundraiser, I reconnected with my friend from high school who I'm now in love with. So I
Well, there
came
you
out,
go.
yeah,
Congratulations.
literally, yeah, found a chosen family and a
Is this person
partner.
in
And
love with you as well? Is this your
oh,
partner?
yeah, yeah, I should say he's my boyfriend. Everything's great.
I wasn't sure. I don't make
um,
assumptions.
yeah, he's my
I
best
love
friend.
humanity. You know, the state of the world these days makes me question a lot all the time. But in the end, when push comes to shove, I do believe in humanity and we come together and we do the right thing and we raise each other up. And it's what keeps me going. So I love that that was your experience and that your community supported you. So do you have any relationship with your parents at all now?
Yeah, so I actually was not in touch with them for around a year.
Okay.
And things got really severe, especially with my dad. But I remember like during that time, I ended up going to New Zealand for abroad because I was able
Nice.
to finance myself going there, which was amazing. I still don't know how that happened. But when I was there, I met this woman who had left a cult, and she had kind of turned her story into a message that inspired so many people. Like she has a TED Talk that has over 6 million views, and she like wrote this best-selling memoir, and just the way she told her life story had touched so many people. And she had an Instagram and all this stuff. And so I met her when I was there, and it kind of inspired me to do the same thing. So I started Max Gets Curious, and
Yeah.
I started to really realize like that curiosity was, and this daring hope and this desire to explore, which is a natural human part of all of us, was something that I tapped into to recover from the anxiety that left me mute, and to seek life beyond this fundamentalist faith community finally, and to dare to come out knowing the negative consequences. And so I started to think, if curiosity has guided me this whole way, how can I use it in other areas of my life?
Yes.
So I started to ask, like, where did my dad come from? Like, why was this religion so important to him? Because we had gone back and forth, and my parents had been like, we taught you all these things. How can you not believe them anymore? And I had been like, there are so many contradictions. Here they are. How do you still believe this? And that went nowhere. So instead, I decided to get curious about why my dad was homophobic, why he believed in these things. And we ended up very slowly coming to understand each other. And actually, he called me to apologize for everything that had happened and to say that he was proud of everything that I had done for myself a couple months ago. And I went to dinner with him over break for his birthday, and he just seemed so happy. Like, there's a lot of mental health stigma in my family because of the religion and the culture. Yeah. So he had been depressed a lot of his life and never really got to live his life for himself. But he said that he was watching motivational videos and getting up at 4 a.m. and enjoying his mornings. And he seemed completely different. I called him over the weekend, and he told me that he gets up to watch the sunrise every morning, and that he wants to move to Hawaii and Las Vegas and California. And he seems so much happier. And I can't help but hope that because I came out, he was kind of reminded that that's something that he can do in his life. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Now,
what a gift.
Our relationship is totally new for the first time, it feels like, because we had the courage to be curious about where we were coming from rather than judging.
I really like that a lot. That's really, really beautiful. So briefly, because we're going to link to everything, but tell us sort of the goals, the purpose behind Max Gets Curious, and what you're doing with that platform.
Yeah, so it's really a celebration of the power of curiosity in our lives. I really want to create a community for people who want to venture beyond the limiting beliefs that they have in their own lives and into lives of greater self-ownership and possibility and exploration and hope. So I have a lot of people reach out to me who are leaving religious backgrounds, people who are seeing the sexism in their culture or their family, or people who want to overcome an addiction, an eating disorder, depression, to come out, things like that. So there's so many resources out there for people who are leaving religious backgrounds and kind of addressing and acknowledging the harm, but there's not really a lot of resources for people who want to find a way forward together.
I love that.
And to explore all the new possibilities that we have now. So
would your platform be valuable to people who aren't leaving a strangling religious experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And that's why I mentioned the cultural part and, people who are just questioning things that our society have taught us, or things from their mental health, like addiction or eating disorders, OCD, things like that.
Yeah. All right. So I am wondering if you can share with us what maybe was the most surprising thing that you found yourself curious about.
Oh, there's so many things.
You could throw a few out.
Yeah. So I am polyamorous, which I had never even thought about until I got together with my partner. And then we kind of both started talking about it, and we were like, yeah, this feels right. And we just did it. We just decided to be polyamorous.
All right.
Never saw myself doing that, but it has worked out perfectly. Also, pole dancing. If you had told me that I would be pole dancing 5 years ago, I'd be like, excuse me.
And this is something you do as a fitness and personal routine, right?
Exactly.
It's not your income currently.
Right. Yeah. Good to specify. I do pole dancing for fitness, and it's really fun. But it was really scary to try out for the first time because of all these preconceived notions that I had.
Right, of course. Yeah.
That's and so also fun. I play the harp because once I saw a vine of someone playing a harp, and I didn't know that people still played the harp. So I just Googled it. I found out that there's a program at my college, and now I play the harp.
I love the harp. So you have been through a lot of transition, and certainly your curiosity has led you down what I think is really a magical path. I'm particularly in love with the story of how it transformed your father. Yeah. I think that's just really special. I'm curious, as you're going through all of this, did you feel brave? Or at what point have you felt like, holy shit, I'm really brave?
I think I definitely felt brave throughout all the places where
Good.
I knew there was risk. So probably for like 5 years. Yeah, it's always been about like the small acts of bravery for me because, that's how I recovered from my anxiety, and that's
Yeah.
how I've kind of shaken free of all my old beliefs and discovered new ones. So
I love
yeah.
that. I love it. Do you have a gratitude practice?
I do. I actually just joined this Instagram group chat where people say 3 things they're grateful for every day, and it's actually upgraded my life. It's really
I
nice
love that
to
you say
see,
that. Yeah.
yeah, other humans like being grateful for different things throughout their day, and to be reminded to do that myself. And
Isn't it
yeah, I
a
have.
wonderful perspective shift?
It is, yeah. And I try to sit down on like my yoga mat every morning, and but also just throughout my life, because there's so many times where I thought I didn't want to be alive anymore, or I thought a
Yeah.
life like this wasn't possible. And now I get to speak and tell my story and connect with people from all over the world, and just to simply live a quote unquote normal life is incredible for me. So yeah, I break out into smiling like just walking down the sidewalk.
I love that so much. I'd love to see that. I'd love to pass you on the street and see
Yeah.
this gratitude for the journey and where you've ended up sort of wash over you. That's so beautiful. And it's a lovely segue into success. I think just as important as a gratitude practice, which I am a big, big fan of, is stopping to honor the things that we've done that have been good, that have moved us forward, these wins, both big and small. How do you celebrate success?
Right. Success to me is about how I live and not what I do. So
Yeah.
I think it's really about making sure that I'm living warmly and authentically and all of those things. But also, I really express gratitude to myself
Yeah.
with gifts and things like that, and like treating myself. I'm
That's
all about treating
celebration.
yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I actually just bought myself like an opal ring that I'm hoping to wear for the second anniversary of my coming out, which is coming out in a month.
Congratulations.
So,
I
yeah,
love that. That's
yeah.
really, really exciting. I am a big fan of that. I celebrate in a lot of different ways, but just recently, I said to myself, if I signed this big contract that I had out there, I was going to buy myself the Away suitcase because I travel a lot for business. It's a really overpriced suitcase, but it's supposed to be awesome. So I signed the contract and I'm ordering my suitcase this week and I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, it's
All
the
right.
little things.
It is. Sometimes it's just the little things. So as we come to the close of the show, I get to ask you what I consider one of the most important questions I ask every week, which is, what is your favorite charitable organization to support?
So that would be Recovering from Religion.
I did not
Probably
know
not
that.
too
I mean, of
surprising.
course, there's an organization called that. But that's an amazing name.
Right.
Tell us.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can figure out what it is, but tell us about it.
Right. So the purpose of the organization is not to deconvert people or to push a certain worldview on anyone or say that religion is always something to be recovered from. It's simply an organization that creates resources for people who want to recover from the religious experiences. So we have a chat line, we have a hotline, we have secular therapy, like a list of secular therapists. We have in-person support groups across the country, even the world. And so I actually volunteer on the chat line whenever I can.
I was going to say, obviously, you're an active member of the organization because you keep saying we.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I know that feeling. Good for you. Well, we're going to share links. They'll be our charity of the week. And
Awesome.
hopefully, folks out there listening, go and check out this organization. If you know anybody who could benefit from it, share it with them. If you have resources to help support them, please, please do that. We come together to make the world a bigger, better, stronger, healthier place. And we need each of you to do that. Max, can you share your 3 words with us one last time?
Jubilant, evolving, twice born.
So really quickly, let's talk about them. I get evolving. I think I see that one pretty clearly, but hit me up with jubilant and twice born.
Yeah, so jubilant it just references all those times I'm walking down the sidewalk and I burst into a smile.
I dig it.
There's just so much like joy of being able to be alive and being able to explore. And I'll have moments throughout the day where I'm like, wow, like I would not be sitting across from this person having this conversation if I had not been curious enough to seek life beyond everything that I've left behind.
Yeah.
And, like I wouldn't be able to like be sipping this hot chocolate in this town because I went to Salem. And I used to be really scared of Salem.
Of course,
like,
the witches.
I wouldn't there's so many experiences and friendships and conversations that I get to have now, and so many different ways of seeing the world that I get to explore and play with, that it's just so free and fun. And now the purpose of my life is just to be able to evolve and grow and be able to be wrong for the rest of my life, which is such a joy-giving idea, I think. So yeah. There's a lot of joy in my life now.
Beautiful. And then what about Twice Born?
Twice Born is something that my professor told me about because he knows a little of my story, and he was like, I think that this applies to you, because there are some of us who kind of have to come to terms with our lives and really choose a different way forward and be reborn in that way. And so Twice Born is something that I like to think of as myself.
I think I can identify with that. I would consider myself twice born there as well. Max, thank you so much for all of this. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your energy and your story and the enthusiasm and this idea that you can be curious, you can be wrong, you can make mistakes, and it's all going to be okay and maybe even better.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, you all listening, you may remember that my word of the year, not my year of the word, but whatever, is explore. And I have truly enjoyed exploring Max's curiosity. I hope that it inspires you. It certainly inspires me. I hope that it helps you look at the world, both the one that you know well and the one that is beyond your personal experience, in a new and courageous way. And don't forget to surround yourself with that gratitude and celebration we talked about. It's a big deal. These practices have an extraordinary power to enrich your life in really magical ways. If you want some support in your gratitude practice, grab a copy of my gratitude journal, Shift Your Focus. You can get it today by visiting vickeryandco.com/store. If you use code BRAVEFILES, all caps, BRAVEFILES, you can save $5 and get free shipping. So get your copy today. And then once you do it, check in with me and tell me how your gratitude practice is impacting your life. I love to hear from listeners, and I personally return each and every email. So thank you so much for being here with us. Max, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me once again.
And this is Heather Vickery, reminding you today and always to go out and choose bravely. The Brave Files is proudly supported by Audible. If you enjoy listening to podcasts, you're sure to love listening to your favorite books on Audible. Get your free 30-day trial complete with a credit for a free audiobook download today simply by visiting audibletrial.com/thebravefiles. Again, that's visiting audibletrial.com/thebravefiles.
Thank you for listening to The Brave Files. Be sure to visit thebravefilespodcast.com to access the show notes and discover fantastic bonus content. Music composed and produced by Matt Lewis of Union Music, LLC.
Special thanks to our editor and audio mix expert, Andrew Olson. I am eternally grateful for all that he does to make each week sound so fantastic. You can hear more of Andrew's work at findandrewolson.com.